Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to S.H.I.E.L.D. Discussions. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
And we're here to talk about the third episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., The Asset, which Dan and I both agree should be titled something to do with gravity. Maybe not gravity, because that movie actually came out this week.
Yeah, that's true. I think Gravitas, the title you suggested, was a good one.
Yeah, I suggested they should have called it Gravitas. I think that would have actually played as a double entendre.
I think so, too. I would have liked that. But The Asset works.
My first complaint is the title is a little bit lame.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding. It's not a big deal. No, it's okay. I mean, I think part of the reason that it's called that is because the idea is, oh man, the asset's actually like a person and not a thing, and also we're supposed to be so completely surprised that the guy that Dr. Hall actually set the whole thing up in the first place. We'll talk about all of that. But anyway, let's get into our general overview, Dan. The first thing that I thought was really cool is that we're bringing in finally an actual comic book character. And B, we're doing kind of a supervillain origin story before setting up that he's actually a supervillain. I think that's all kind of cool.
I think so too. It's very much in the style of comic book storytelling, where we have an ongoing format that we know we're going to have space to tell the story. So we set things up and seed them and pay it. I don't think we'll see this guy next episode. I think we'll pay it off later down the line. That's just sort of the feeling I got from the end of the episode when Coulson said, lock it up. I don't want anyone to go in there and, make it unclassified and all that sort of thing. So yeah, I was very pleased with the way the story was told. If you didn't know the character's name, and I would imagine most people didn't because it's sort of an obscure supervillain they used. It was a complete surprise, I would think, to see him, turn into a supervillain at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't. Yeah, I probably made it sound like I went into this knowing who it was. I really didn't. I watched the episode and then later was like, that's why all the gravity stuff. Okay, I had heard of Graviton. I didn't really know anything about him. I guess he's a somewhat more major reoccurring Avengers villain than I realized. He's had a number of appearances, but I didn't know anything about him.
Yeah, I think he was created by Jim Shooter, and I can't remember the artist, in the 70s.
77 is what I wrote down.
Yeah. He's not a character that I have a whole lot of emotional attachment to, but...
Buscema.
Oh, I love Buscema, so that's very cool. I just think at least it's very cool that we're getting some comic book stuff this early, especially. I think this will satiate a lot of people that said that this show is not comic booky enough for them or is sort of pointless if we're doing Marvel, supervillains in the show, especially Avengers villains.
Do you feel like they're kind of going down a list of trying to address those things for fans without doing any like huge giant stories right away so that they can kind of set up the characters they want to tell stories about? Like the first episode with Maria Hill, it was like, okay, don't worry, you will see characters that were in the movies. And then in the second episode, don't worry, you will see Nick Fury at least sometimes. And then in this episode it was, don't worry, we are aware that there is a giant comic book canon that we can pull people from. I wonder what it'll be in the fourth one. It'll be like don't worry, we do know that superheroes sometimes wear costumes. Like I would be really surprised if we didn't. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw like a mask next episode or something.
Yeah, that would be very cool. I mean, I think they're doing that to a degree, especially in this episode. I noticed a lot of Coulson being like, hey guys, I was in the Avengers, remember that?
There was a lot of that going on, yeah. And in fact, I thought it was a little bit heavy on that.
It was. There were, I mean, not that, every line of dialogue he had was that, but I think there were at least 3 or 4 lines where he was saying something to the degree of, I was in the Avengers. But I have to say, when Franklin Hall at the end was talking about S.H.I.E.L.D. And how their quest to find an unlimited energy source led to an alien invasion, it definitely served the story and what he was sort of talking about and what his philosophy was in relation to what he was trying to do in the episode. So there were some that were obligatory, like Coulson being like, I saw a lot of combat with the Avengers, and Melinda May saying he died. There was things like that, but at the same time, they did reference things from the movie in a useful way to the story. So, at least they tried, I suppose.
It wouldn't have felt so irritatingly driven home to me if they hadn't already done it so much in the first two episodes. Like
Yeah.
once we got to the, because they've done that every episode. There's been at least two references in every
Right.
episode to
Yeah.
the fact that he died in Avengers, and at least two other references to the fact that there are Avengers and we have this movie that this thing spun out of, which I'm not really complaining about because I expected that, and I guess I'm just I it's I'm not complaining so much as I'm just like kind of antsy to get this show on its own legs. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
And I'm not expecting it this early, but I'm just kind of looking to the future because I know that the point is going to come where we're going to look back on these episodes and we're going to kind of roll our eyes as with the obligatory, okay, these were the things we had to do to set all this up. And when we go back and rewatch the show, we're going to have to kind of trudge through the stuff again, going, yeah, okay, we know, and the baseball collection, and we know, the
Right.
card
Yeah. There
collection,
was an obligatory reference to that in here too. You're right.
like all that kind of stuff. But again, I liked it a lot more once we got to the end, and Hall had that line like that you mentioned about the Shield bringing in the alien invasion. And I think that that's really important because Coulson's view of Shield and of government in the just in the broad sense is so much different from Fury's.
Oh
And
yeah.
I like that we're really driving that home because if Coulson, even the Coulson before he died, because obviously I think they're trying to make us think at least that this Coulson is a little bit different and a little bit more oversimplified than the old one because of his death and whatever it is that's happened to him.
Yeah.
Like he's really embracing this very two-dimensional optimism. At the same time, I feel like even the original Coulson wouldn't have done what Fury did. I don't think he would have been morally ambiguous enough to have been okay with trying to, for instance, build another cosmic cube like they were doing in Avengers.
I agree. And
He'd run things entirely differently.
yeah, I agree, and I like that the three major Shield characters that we're dealing with in the Marvel Cinematic Universe at large, I suppose, Maria Hill, Fury, and Coulson, have three different distinct views of what Shield is, what it should do, and how it should operate. I feel like Coulson is the optimistic one. Hill is the one that's sort of the ends justify the means, a little bit more of a cynical person than Fury's the midway point between the two of them, where he's okay with doing morally ambiguous things, but he's still optimistic with S.H.I.E.L.D. being a peacekeeping force that can work with regular sorts of people like the Avengers in terms of them being citizens, if you know what I mean. Like Maria Hill is
Yeah,
completely opposed to that in the Avengers. She's like, we should be doing this on our own. These people aren't trustworthy. Why are we investing our time and our resources in these people? And Fury optimistically believes in them despite the differences that they have initially. So yeah, I really like the character dynamic that all three of those people have.
you're right. Coulson and Fury would have both on their own come up with the old-fashioned notion in Avengers that Fury talks about with the idea of a superhero team, whereas Maria Hill would have never even thought of doing anything like that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, let's go ahead and jump into the episode a little bit before we get into best and worst moment. What else really jumped out at you in this one as just fodder for discussion?
I thought this was probably my favorite episode of the series so far, just because we got to see Sky doing things that spoke a lot to her character. I feel like I got to know her a lot more than I had in previous episodes, just seeing how capable she is as an intellect in this episode. I was really impressed with how smart and how quick on her feet she is, and that made me like her quite a bit. Um, I'll talk about what my best moment was, but it definitely involved her and the spy antics that she sort of goes through in here. And not that she hadn't proven herself to be capable before, but it's more of like her doing other things other than, living in a van and being a hacker, But that's a
Yeah,
very
yep.
specific skill set that is useful. But to see her in the field here being so effective made me like her quite a bit more than I had before.
Me too, yeah, and you get the sense that she really is a mainstay in this show and that she's not a red herring. Given that it's a Whedon show, I didn't want to write out the conclusion, and I guess I still shouldn't. I didn't want to write off the conclusion that she might be written out of the show in 10 episodes, because that sort of thing has been done in Whedon shows in the past. There was a major character who was only involved in a three-prong ensemble cast in the first season of Angel that was written out after like 10 episodes.
Wow.
And so with this whole idea of maybe she wants to be an agent of Shield, but maybe it's all just a ruse. I've been kind of going back and forth on that as to maybe they're playing her up to be a big character, but she's ultimately not going to be. From this episode, given that they were kind of doing this tug of war, trying to make the viewership think that she was going to double cross Shield right away here um, after the cliffhanger from last episode, and then she just uses the fact that she's working with Shield as a way to double cross the bad guy, which by the way didn't really play for me all that well. I was pretty sure that they weren't going to do that this early. I was pretty sure that by the third episode they weren't going to have her double cross Shield right away. So like I found that predictable, but at the same time, I like that we get to see her actually really wrestling with that, because you get to the end and she keeps talking about wanting to know Ward's moment of when he decided that he wanted to be an agent and when this kind of life came to him. And we see her somewhat experience that actually in this episode. So now I can see her as an agent. You get to the end and now she's committed and now she's punching the bag. And I liked all of that quite a bit. So that I'm invested enough in her character so that when the moment really does come where she's supposed to, as I'm sure is inevitably coming, where she's supposed to completely give up what she knows about Shield to the Rising Tide, I'm going to care a lot more about that moment than about her internal conflict there.
Oh yeah, definitely. Um, I sort of liked the thing about her maybe betraying Shield in here because maybe I wasn't I was being a little bit more naive than you were, I suppose. I don't know. I just thought it was very interesting in that it spoke to her character to sort of betray them at that point, considering the parallels she had with this Ian Quinn guy, how they both have this complete disregard for rules and authority at the beginning of the episode. And I think the episode, I mean, we'll talk more about this when we get to the big idea, but I think the episode is largely about the relationships that people have with authority and how you should gauge that relationship. I mean, Sky and Ward are sort of on the opposite ends of the spectrum and how they deal with that. And I was sort of, for a minute there, buying the fact that she would sell them out if she was in a position where it was like, she gets dragged out by security and is in a really bad situation, or sell out Shield and save herself. Even if she wasn't gonna outright betray them and become evil, I could have bought that she would sell Shield out to save herself. I guess at that point, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, to save herself, sure. Perhaps, but I just thought this early they wouldn't go there. And also, I kind of saw through that guy as a very two-dimensional, power-hungry villain early on, and Sky is not that. And so, like, she believes in power of the people, not in power in any one person's hands. It's not about government versus private sector. It's about not no one entity having too much power.
Right.
And this guy, clearly from the very beginning, she's not going in there because she's like okay with this guy. She clearly has as many problems with him as Shield does from the very beginning, and that's why I didn't think she'd sell him out. But again, also it's just too early. They're not going to resolve that cliffhanger from last episode in the third episode.
Right, exactly.
But I actually found the entire episode somewhat predictable, and yet liked it. It's one of those things where I'm not sure how they could have gotten around it being. Although there's one big thing we'll talk about a little later. But or well, actually, we don't really have a place for it. Okay, let's talk about it now. One thing I really had reservations about, and tell me if you had this or if you think I'm out to lunch on this. I didn't buy that Coulson, and I guess this is maybe supposed to be part of his eternal optimism. I don't know. I wasn't sure that I bought Coulson going in at the end to grab Hall with no thought to the possible contingency of maybe that guy is actually in cahoots with the bad guy. He was so blindsided by that, and Coulson has been talking so much about having like a contingency for everything and like being ready for any possible scenario. So when he walks in and Hall set it up and wanted to be there, and he goes, "Well, I have to admit, I didn't think of that." I'm like, "Really, Coulson? You didn't think of that? Like, you guys were so surprised that somebody could grab this guy as an asset that you trust him that much
I think the
that
idea was that he didn't
I had
have
a
a
tough time with that."
contingency for him having an ulterior motive other than being in cahoots with the bad guy or being in cahoots with Shield, because he wasn't in cahoots with the bad guy. He
Well, no,
was out for
you're right.
himself.
You're right, but okay, you're right. I mean, I just thought that the thing Coulson was most surprised by was that it wasn't exactly the thing he thought it was. That he wasn't really kidnapped. Um,
Right. I mean, I don't know. I think he was sort of expecting to go in there and if he was in the cahoots with the bad guy, just sort of pop
He
him
just
and walk out of there. I didn't think
yeah.
he was thinking that he would be
He
activated.
didn't think he was going to walk into an ethical conundrum, is what you're saying.
Right. I mean, I don't think he expected that machine to be activated and like tearing down the mansion when he walked into that room.
Well, no, he would have different equipment with him if he was anticipating
Right,
that.
because
Yeah,
even
you're
if he was in cahoots with the bad guy, that guy wouldn't be tearing down the bad guy's, mansion with the machine.
no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, and I mean, like again, like you said, no, he's not in cahoots with the bad guy. I guess I was just thinking that like if he had thought, maybe he wasn't just straight up kidnapped, he would have had other he wouldn't be as blindsided by that as he was. But
And I think maybe it plays into his internal optimism that he thinks inherently everyone that's with S.H.I.E.L.D. is going to trust them and be on their side, especially a scientist that had been in their employ for so long.
yeah, and ultimately, and here's the reservation I have about that, because that's the other, because I thought of that, but the thing is, if that ends up being the case, and then ultimately Sky completely surprises him, I'm gonna have a problem with that.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like he could not have possibly brought her on board, not thinking that maybe she would double cross them, and that the whole reason that she was there was to do that. And that's why I really, from the end of last episode, kind of want Coulson to like know what she's doing and to have seen what she sent out on her phone. I don't know if they're gonna go there,
Sure.
and maybe they'll make me believe it, but because again, I still have that weird thing about well, Fury doesn't know, and that seems strange, but. I'm just saying that, like, I don't want Coulson to be that naive.
Yeah, I mean, and
And I guess that scene just made me afraid he would be that naive on the grand scale when it comes to the Sky situation.
I have a feeling that he does know, like we had discussed last podcast, that she is having some sort of ulterior motive and is sort of playing the cards because, like, even if she is giving away information to the Rising Tide, I don't think there is information on this team that she could potentially give away that would be inherently damaging to Shield, at least yet, to the adventures they've been on, if you know what I mean.
No, not really. I mean, except for the artifact last time, you wouldn't want that to get in the wrong hands. But
Right. So, I mean, if he knows she's potentially giving away information, he could trace, her encrypted signal back to wherever she's sending it. I mean, maybe he's playing.
right.
I'm not sure. I would like to think that he has some sort of idea, but we'll have to see where it goes.
I thought the guy who played Hall was fantastic, and that he is a great choice for a potential supervillain.
I think he is too, and there's precedence for that because I was looking up his acting credits, and he was Professor Quirrell, the evil teacher
In
from the
Harry
first Harry
Potter,
Potter movie, who has
right?
Voldemort on the back of his head, which I didn't even recognize him because he just has a beard.
And he's also 13 years older
That's
now,
true. That's true.
so he looks quite a bit different. He looked a lot younger there.
Yes, he did. But he interestingly enough plays a similar kind of character. I mean, he's not stuttering and as unsure of himself on the surface as Professor.
He's conniving.
Yes, exactly. Um, so yeah, I was very impressed with the actor who played him.
Well, should we go ahead and jump into our categories?
Yes, yes.
Let's do that. All right. What was your favorite moment this time?
My favorite moment was the entire Sky making her way into Ian Quinn's office and getting him to give away the information that she got out of him. Hacking into the defenses of his mansion and stuff. I just thought it was very unpredictable as to what she was doing for me the whole time. I didn't know what her motives were, where it was going to go, what was going to happen. Like that whole situation, even if you thought that she was not going to betray Shield, I just didn't know what sorts of situations were going to happen based on what she was doing. You know what I mean? It kept me on the edge of my seat
Right.
the whole time.
There's an inherent unpredictability in at least the scene where you do have this nice urgent how's she gonna get out of this one moment, and I also like how it pays off. The whole thing with her being trained at the beginning because she's not ready to handle a gun, and then they pay that off with "Are you prepared to fire?" Nope, and then
Yeah.
she runs. I love that. I love that. That was hilarious.
I thought
I
it was
like that
hilarious.
the delivery was nope.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed that quite a bit, and it just spoke to the intelligence of the character and how smooth she is as a spy. Like she was born to do this, you know?
Yeah, I'm a lot more on board with her now, and I know a lot of people have been saying that they find her kind of irritating. I actually liked her already a lot more than other people, and so I'm really on board with her at this point. In a way I wasn't even last episode.
Me too, especially the background that's revealed about her and how she was sort of, foster child, and you buy that someone who didn't have a consistent and stable figure of authority in her life, like her parent, like a parental figure, would have a resistance to that sort of thing when she's older.
By the way, I love the comparison contrast between her and Ward's backgrounds, their parental upbringings, because that's the one place where finally we see a real connection between them. That they had bad experiences as children, and I also like how vague it is. We don't know exactly what all of that is yet. We have little hints. We get more about Ward than we do her, but man, there's that look she gives at the toward the end when it's kind of driven home that she had a bad upbringing, that she had a bad experience as a kid, and she just gives the camera this look at death that I thought was fantastic.
Oh yeah, and when Quinn mentions to her that he goes no family.
That was the scene. He was talking. I couldn't remember who it was. Yes, talking to Quinn. She gives this look where like you don't get a, and I love that they're not doing this in flashback. I love
Yeah,
that. You don't know anything yet, but there's so much going on in her face.
yeah, I think she acted this really well. I'm really liking the actress. We had discussed this a little bit before we'd recorded. I think she's one of the better actors on the show.
I'm gonna call her with Coulson. I'm gonna call her the best actor in the show right now.
Yeah, I think she's fantastic.
I'm gonna go that far. I think she and Coulson are right on par with each other. I think Ward's okay, but I think she is just acting circles around almost everybody in this cast right now.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, like you said before we had started recording, there's always something else going on behind her eyes that we don't know. And
She knows something I don't know all the time. That's great.
exactly. And to juxtapose that with Coulson, who is the same exact thing going on, just from a different perspective,
Yeah.
you would think he knows things, and there's things he doesn't know even about himself, and you can see that going on behind his eyes when he's doing things. But yeah, that was my favorite moment of the episode was her entry into the
Well,
office.
I'll go ahead and give you my favorite moment. This is something that I'm sure some people didn't like because the show has been getting a lot of flack for being kind of silly, and I loved how comic book this episode was. That was one of the things that really jived with
Mhm.
me, and I'm gonna call my favorite moment the thing that most blindsided me, and that was a trucker that turns out to be a Shield
That
agent.
was hilarious.
It's hilarious. He starts typing on it like on his windshield, like it's
Yeah.
a hologram. That was hilarious. And then he's Agent Mac. Like they went that far. I'm
See,
sorry. I thought that was hilarious. I
no,
love
I think
that.
it's hilarious. I just want to address the thing that you said about people giving the show flack for being too funny and lighthearted. Like, I don't understand that. Have they seen the Marvel Studios films? Like, this is pretty consistent with the tone of them, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I think some people think that some of the dialogue is forced, and that's
I
fair.
mean, that's fair. But, like, tone-wise,
Tone wise, and I've heard tone issues, and I'm with you. I don't get that either. I think that the tone is fine, and again, part of it is a bias thing, and I'm acutely aware of my bias on this. Again, and I don't mean to harp on this too much, but I really enjoy turning the show on, and in the corner it says TV PG. I mean, like this is for kids to watch with their parents, and so I'm kind of okay with the lighthearted tone. It's because I'm with you. It's consistent with the movies. The movies want to be for kids along with
yeah,
the adults,
exactly.
and this is doing the very same thing. And so I just feel like if I mean I don't want to say if you like the Marvel movies, how dare you not like this show? That's not
Right,
fair. But I
yeah.
just but I just mean that like yeah, totally. I don't think it's that inconsistent.
I mean,
Not to call anybody out. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I don't share that. I think the tone is fine.
yeah, I was just saying, like, if it's a consistency issue, I don't understand it. I can see a taste issue if you like darker things, that's fine.
And if this is too, I can see this being too light for people, especially based on what else is on television right now. We might have some people that are quite a bit younger than me, at least, that are just not used to adult television being this lighthearted because we don't do that as much anymore.
And that's what I personally like about the show so much. I like smiling when I watch things. I don't, I don't
Yes, as do I. Yeah.
know. uh, but
And again, I'm enjoying the juxtaposition between this and Arrow because Arrow gets really emotionally heavy, and then I get to watch this show, and it's not as much that yet. I imagine it will be eventually,
yeah, and
but
it's not like it's straying away from addressing heavy or at least thoughtful
it's
ideas
about
either.
things. It's not a cartoon.
Right, exactly.
What
So
was your
that's
moment?
personally where I'm coming from in liking this show
Yeah.
so much. Anyway,
What was your worst moment?
my worst moment was everything Agent Fitz did in this episode, especially the monkey bit. I did not understand what was happening, and I didn't like his obligatory boob reference in here either.
And I'm giving Dan a handshake across the internet because that is exactly that is exactly what I wrote down. I wrote those two things. In fact, I will read what I wrote: Fitz's monkey idea and his sky chest joke.
Yeah.
So I wrote exactly what you wrote.
Yeah, I don't know. I think
It's
the
not
character is supposed to
his jokes
be
are
like this naive, socially awkward kid, but I just don't find him appealing at all. Maybe it's the actor. I'm not sure what it is.
I don't think and I know we keep harping on the European Wonder Twins, but they can't act.
I don't think the girl's is bad. I personally don't have as much of a problem with her, maybe in this episode, because most of the time when he was doing things like that, she was like, all right, dude, come on, shut up.
There's something about her that feels kind of forced to me too. I'm hoping eventually that they get enough dimension that they'll prove to me, oh yeah, they can act. And so far, the material they've gotten, they don't feel like they're of the caliber of some of the other actors on this show.
Mhm.
That there's too much acting going on, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with too, they haven't been given any sort of meaty material either. They're just sort of comic relief at this point, or at least attempted comic relief.
Yeah, don't you get the sense that they don't know who they are either?
Right,
Like
exactly,
it's like watching Brent Spiner play Data on the first episode of TNG. Brent Spiner's a brilliant actor, but he didn't know who that character was yet, and it shows. And I'm getting that with these two still 3 episodes in.
exactly.
All right, so let's move on to what's the big idea. This one was pretty cut and dry to me. A couple of really big things. Obviously, a lot of government overregulation versus unrestricted science run rampant.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah,
kind of the big one.
the big one I latched onto was the relationship that people should have with institutions and figures of authority. You sort of have two people on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Sky, she and Quinn, they disobey all forms of authority. Sky for different reasons than Quinn. Quinn sort of thinks he's above the law because he knows better than other people. He's sort of arrogant. And Sky just wants people to be on the same level playing field. And we have Ward, who's sort of like naively follows orders and believes authority always has the right answer. And we get to see in here like Shield has made mistakes, like Hall mentions. He says that they made mistakes with the Tesseract in the Avengers film and things like that. But they also do have good intentions, and I think the point of the episode is you should question authority, but don't always assume they're either good or evil inherently. It's much more complicated than that black and white view of the world that some people like to think it is.
Yeah, and importantly, and authority is the right word, but importantly, it's not just governmental authority. It's anybody with authority.
Right.
Because this isn't really playing again. Like I said earlier, I like that the episode is not playing government versus private sector. It's using both of those things, but it's showing the corruption and also like benignness of both,
Hmm.
right? Like
Exactly.
you see people who are in the private sector trying to do the right thing, and you see people in the private sector trying to do doing the wrong thing
Yeah.
for the pursuit of power. And you see the same thing with the government. You've got people all over Shield. You have some of them have the right idea, and some of them have the wrong idea. And so the whole point with the graviton machine is that no one person should have that much power, and it should have too much power because we can't trust anybody with that much power. And that's kind of what it's playing up. And then it even gets more complicated because, well, the thing he wants to do is kill a bunch of people in order to get rid of that, and that doesn't seem quite right either. So there's even a third alternative that seems kind of wrong.
Right, and it's interesting that the guy that doesn't want this power to exist is the one that ends up having it at the end of the day.
Yes, that's
Um,
going to be really cool later on, I'm sure. I
yes,
mean,
yes. And
because you said the whole show is about power and authority. So when we get there, I mean that's the thing that's really holding the episodes together so far, because it's very much a standalone um, uh, kind of show so far, where each episode is telling its own story while moving along a little bit of a larger, grander plot. But what's really holding everything together are the ideas, and I feel like every episode so far has been about power and authority.
right, and you have this guy Quinn too, who's like, preaching about how intrusive and oppressive government authority is when he's trying to do the same exact things that the government does, just as an individual by his own rules. It's just sort of like him throwing a temper tantrum in a way, wanting to get his way no matter what, and nobody's going to be able to stop him or tell him what to do.
Yeah, his philosophy is very arbitrary. He says it's bad for them to have power because they're not me, essentially.
Right,
You know what I
exactly.
mean? Like, yeah, and so it's very easy to just label things, and I like that this is also a show about oversimplification. It says we can't just label things and say individuals are good and groups are bad. You know,
And that's such
and
a
government is good and private sector is bad. Now there's bad stuff in both, right?
right,
And
exactly.
so the show is I think, without being too preachy about it, because it is a very lighthearted show, and I think in some ways even an idealistic sort of show where, well, we do have good guys and they always win. I mean, it is still that
Right.
kind of show. And I think it's impressive, by the way, that we can manage to have a show where we know who the good guys are, and at least so far I've tended to agree with the good guys, and they're government agents. That's, I mean,
Right.
you know,
And I think that that's such a great theme for a spy show to address, right? Because you want to see these people walking the gray lines. This is like what the best X-Men stories always do. You have these gray lines. You don't know exactly which philosophy is the right one, really. You know who the good guys are, but you can always see where people like Magneto are coming from, for example,
yeah.
walking
Well,
those sorts of lines.
you know what else addressed some of this? Skyfall.
Yes, exactly. We had talked about that a little bit in the last podcast, and I think um, it's not doing the same sorts of things as Skyfall, obviously, because this is drastically different tone-wise from
Oh yeah,
Skyfall.
absolutely.
It's not like this is like a repeat of that. I
But
don't.
it is about similar ideas in the sense of,
Yes, yes, definitely.
asking the question of a, can the government save us? That's in there, and I mean, maybe not the government at large, but government institutions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
there, and b, even if they theoretically can. Is that really their intention, or are they pretending to do that to amass power and suppress people?
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
and so all of those questions are in there.
And I like that, especially with Shield, it's such a good idea to do that sort of thing with, because Shield isn't just a single government institution. They're a world peacekeeping task force. They're supposed to be like the UN's, institution of, spying and those sorts of things. So it's like the entire world asking that question about us.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it also helps it not to be too on the nose, making like giant blatant statements about the government of the country that the show is being made in.
Yes,
Like it's talking about these ideas in a. I mean, a lot of it is very contemporary and very timely, but I don't think that so far anyway have we had any just straight up this is what's wrong with our government.
right, and we have Quinn mention the U.S. government when he's talking about oppressive forces here, but that guy is so out of whack.
Yeah, he's the bad guy, but I also don't think it's the show saying, well, anybody that has problems with the government is a crazy person.
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't think it's
definitely.
saying that either,
Yeah,
which is
it
good.
walks that line very well, and
Yeah, it does a great job walking that line. I mean, and I like those kind of politics where you can be of different walks of life and get something from this, and not feel like you're being preached at by one side or another side of any topic that we might be
oh
discussing.
yeah, and that's very rare in today's world.
Oh yeah, that's tough. Well, it's also difficult to pull off, and part of the
Oh,
reason
it
it's
is.
rare is because it's hard.
Yeah,
um, well, let's go and move on, shall we? Our guest stars this time, we had David Conrad, who plays Quinn, and he's been a character actor in a lot of things I never watched.
yeah.
He
One
was
of the
in
things I saw was
Public,
Ghost Whisperer, which I've never seen.
I never saw that. He was in CSI Miami, all kinds of random things that I never actually watched. And then Ian Hart, played Franklin Hall, and he was recently in Bates Motel, which I've not been watching.
Oh, I wanted to check that show out because I am a huge fan of the original Psycho film, but I haven't heard good things about the show. I've heard a lot of good things about Hannibal, the show that the guy from Casino Royale, he played Rashif.
Yeah,
He plays Hannibal in that. And I want to watch that. I've heard good things about
I
him
heard
as
good
well.
things about both.
Did you?
I
Did
I heard Bates Motel was okay, but I've not seen it yet, so I don't know.
I'll have to check it out and see what I think for myself because Norman Bates is one of my favorite horror characters. But anyway.
Well, Dan, did you have any favorite lines this time? I didn't feel like this one was so ripe for memorable lines of dialogue.
My favorite line in the show came from Hall, actually, and this speaks to what we were talking about before about the gray lines and these characters. Sort of, you can see where they're coming from in a villain sense. I liked what Hall said when he said, "I know history never celebrates what didn't happen. They'll call this a tragedy. They won't understand what the good I did here," and I mean that there's no truer statement than that. You know, if you do something that's perceived by a large institution of authority like S.H.I.E.L.D. as bad, even if you're working towards some sort of greater good in your eyes, the history books are not going to be reflecting your point of view.
It's funny because I also wrote down a whole line, but it wasn't that one. I liked we have to live with the choices we make, but sometimes we have to die with them too. Mostly because I felt like we needed that to justify all of the talk about Coulson's death in Avengers.
Right.
That was kind of nice that was there. But I mean, you have this. What I really like about it, and I'm going to talk more about this when we get into predictions, but what I like about it is that immediately gives Coulson and Hall this very personal connection
Mhm.
that they both felt the need to die for something and they made a choice and they were committed and they couldn't turn around. And what I like is that Hall is not this like two-dimensional bad guy where like yeah he like believes in his cause but he's like really wrong. You can kind of see where this guy's coming from.
Yeah, I mean, he said, kill a few and save millions. Like, that was what he was trying to do in that situation. He thought that if that power got out, millions of people would have died because it would have been misused.
Well, and here's the distinction I think you have to make. The big difference between him and other villains that have said that, and he wasn't a villain yet. I'm not even going to call him a villain in that scene
Right,
yet.
right.
He's close, but not really. The big difference between him and somebody say say Ozymandias in Watchmen
Right.
is that Ozymandias did something that was like preventative that was really hypothetical,
Mhm.
and it was one of those things where it's like, well, we don't really know if the bomb's going to go off or not. He kind of thought so because of Dr. Manhattan. It's sticky, that sort of thing. But I mean, like, that's the big, well, I have to kill all these people to save the world. But that was more about him getting power, right? Whereas here, it's, well, this thing is going to kill people and it's going to get in the wrong hands. And if we don't, the only way to stop it is to allow people to die. I think the distinction is we're not killing people to stop it. It's that's a byproduct of something he feels is necessary and has to happen.
Right, and I think in the Watchmen book, it's sort of a little bit more similar to what's going on in this situation, where he had the alien come in as a common enemy for the humans to fight against, so they'd be able to work together.
Yeah, there's that too. But I mean, like, the whole thing is preventing a bad thing from getting in somebody's hands that's gonna be to make it too powerful. I guess the question is, how would you stop this situation without people dying?
Right, exactly. So that's sort of
And that's where he's coming
the
from, because
interesting.
ultimately he kills himself.
Right, exactly.
And I mean, he allows himself to die. Coulson really kind of does it, but like nobody else has to die, but somebody did.
Right.
So I guess ultimately you could say, well, if he was really doing the right thing, he would have just jumped in it in the first place. Um,
Well, I mean, not necessarily though, because if he jumped in it,
he still thought he was going to die, so I mean, it was still a sacrifice.
he wanted to just destroy the machine outright. When if he jumped into it, the machine wasn't destroyed, and he now has all that power. Like the machine
Yeah,
is still on the table. Now it's in the hands of a giant government institution that he
yeah,
feels will probably misuse that power.
that's a good point. Yeah. And so then you have to question Coulson a little bit, but it's not like he knew exactly what was going to happen if that, yeah.
Right, exactly. And that sort of plays into what Hall was saying.
I just like that it's complicated.
Right, exactly. Hall was saying that, Shield tried to do that thing with the Tesseract and the alien invasion came. Look, it just happened again. Coulson meddled with something that Hall was trying to do, and he created this really dangerous thing by accident.
Yeah. But then at the same time, how would we have felt about Coulson if he'd let it happen?
Exactly, exactly. That's the moral
So
conundrum.
there's no right answer. Yeah, and I love situations like that because that's real life. There's no right answer.
Exactly.
And then we have to really question, ends justifies the means and that sort of thing, because you and I are inherently going to judge Coulson based on what happens next.
Yes,
It's hard not to do that.
right.
No matter what your morality is, you and I are going to feel differently about that guy depending on what happens later.
Exactly. That's what I found to be so interesting about this episode
That's
specifically, and why I
that's
liked it the most out of all of them. All of
yeah.
these.
Well, fair enough. I still like the pilot more, but it hit me in all the right places. You're right, though. I think this is more interesting in a thematic and idea sort of sense. Did you catch any? Let's go and move on. Oh, you know what? I haven't said my favorite lines yet.
Sure.
Well, I guess I said that one. I'm sorry. I had one other one. I had a comedic one. I'm
Oh,
sorry. I
nice.
forgot. I was like, what are we on? What are we on? I liked how can you run if you're curled up in a ball?
That was funny. I
We're
liked
mixing our metaphors there a little bit.
I liked a lot of Sky's comedic lines in here, like when Melinda May handed her the textbooks and she's like, "You want me to bench press this?"
Bench press this.
I thought, yeah, she was real
And she
funny.
goes, "Well, Dr. Hall, it's gonna be a while." The only comic book reference I caught, of course, was Graviton. Franklin Hall is Graviton. And by the way, I guess I should probably say this for predictions, but we're almost there. He was apparently affiliated with AIM.
Yes, he was.
And that makes me wonder if there's not a little bit of possible validity to my earlier prediction from the first episode that we might end up with AIM and Hydra, and I'm thinking like AIM alongside Hydra. The more I'm thinking about it, I'm wondering because we've gotten almost as many drops about something like AIM as we have Hydra. I'm wondering if maybe there's not some kind of like group that's both of them together somehow.
It'll be interesting to see what they do, considering how heavily AIM was involved in Iron Man 3, if that organization continues without Aldrich Killian.
Yeah,
I would love to see them go further with
you're
AIM,
right. There's a
especially.
lot of precedence there because we had both Hydra and AIM already.
And Hydra's going to be in the second Captain America movie. I saw previews of action figures released at New York Comic Con of like Hydra agents in classic Hydra gear. So I'm pretty excited for that too.
But
And
does that necessarily mean they're modern day? Because we don't know how much flashback we're going to get in that movie.
well, that movie's supposed to be the Shield movie, and Captain America. So I mean, I'm pretty convinced, especially since we didn't see the same sort of Hydra movies in Hydra uniforms in World War II, that they're going to be present day.
The only reason that I wonder about it is because I would figure that they would need to do a significant amount of flashback to show us what happened to Bucky through time. So I'm just thinking that like it might not be all the way back to World War II, but it could be a different era. Yes.
It could be. I don't know how involved Hydra would be with Russia, but
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good. Well, anyway. Okay. Well, now that we're already doing it, unless did you notice any other comic book
I
references
did. I got
besides that?
two more.
Oh, go ahead. Cool.
Melinda May referenced the plane being named Shield 616, which is, of
Oh,
course, a reference to the Marvel Universe Planet 616. And when they were going against that cowboy guy, he was wearing a white hat, which is typical of the Marvel Western characters, Kid Colt, Rawhide Kid, and Matt Slade, the old school Marvel Western characters.
oh, I would never have even thought of that. Good call.
I just was kind of thrown off by the fact that
Good
they
eye.
kept going, "This is like the Wild West. This is like the Wild West," like three times in that scene. And I was like, okay, they must be talking about those Old West characters, I guess.
They're trying really hard to make these. Yeah, I'd have to say that I don't think it's that hard to come up with cool comic book references and insert them in your show, and I don't know that this show is doing a great job of that.
Yeah.
Well, the big prediction I have, and again, this is more of a hope than a prediction, but I think this is likely to be the case. I want to see Graviton become Coulson's big arch nemesis.
Me too. That would be awesome.
That's what I think is going to happen and should happen.
I agree. Um, I we forgot to look up the viewer's name before we started the podcast, and we'll give you credit for this quasi prediction kind of thing. I think there's a little bit more to your theory in this episode too, especially. Some one of our viewers, I think it was one of our viewers in the comments, was speculating that Sky might be Spider Woman, and I think they might be onto something with their prediction there, because in this episode especially, it seems like men are just intoxicatingly attracted to Sky when they first meet her really fast. Like, maybe not intoxicatingly so, but it just seems like that's one of the first things that's always mentioned whenever Sky goes up to someone is how attractive she is. Maybe that's just because she naturally is attractive, but it just happens to be really quick to me. And that's Spider-Woman's power. She has a pheromone power. She used to be an agent of Hydra before she was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And she has a damaged sort of background life with her family. There's a lot of stuff with her parents splitting up in her background and her having to live in all different kinds of places. She erased her name and has a different identity now. I think there's might be some credence there to her possibly being Jessica Drew, if not Spider Woman, in the future. It'll be interesting to see if that happens. I'm not sure, but I think it would be a. And she did make an obligatory Spider-Man reference in the first episode, talking about the with great power thing. So
Don't you think that when you have a show like this that's supposed to be based from Marvel Comics, and every single major character in your show we've never heard of,
mhm.
and one of them has an alias and has told us from the very beginning, almost from the moment we met her, that that's not her real name, that it would be an enormous missed opportunity if she didn't turn out to be someone we've heard of.
Yeah, I mean, and that would be very cool in making this show feel important. I mean, a lot of people have been complaining that this show isn't important enough
It's
for
too
them, I guess.
superfluous. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like if you made her Spider Woman and eventually put her in the movies, I think that would be very cool.
If she's Spider Woman and Coulson turns out to be Vision, which I know people still think and I'm not sure about, but I'm just saying if that happened, like you would immediately have two very close knit Marvel characters that are not B characters and also that have had a lot of things to do. I don't know that Vision has had all that much to do with Shield, but Jessica Drew certainly has.
Oh yeah, definitely. She's yeah, all of her past stuff has to do with spy things, so that would be very cool to see.
I'm just hoping that it doesn't turn out that like that's bogus because it would. By the way, it would be really weird if that was all totally circumstantial because it seems really likely after just 3 episodes with all those things you mentioned. But I don't know. I guess it's possible that her character is somehow belongs to Sony just because it has Spider in the name. But I don't know.
I wouldn't think so because
You wouldn't think so
the
either.
mythos stuff isn't connected at all. Like it's not like
She's not Spider
Spider-Woman and
Man.
Peter Parker are in any way related. Like they make jokes about that all the time in the regular comics. And, like Spider-Man's like, "You stole my name. I should have gotten a copyright on that. Be making royalties off of you."
Yeah, and you couldn't use the Ultimate one because she's a clone.
Right,
But
exactly.
well, Dan, what? Let's go ahead and go on finally to our trivia for this week. And what was your trivia question from last week, and what's the answer?
Uh, I feel like I may have not been specific enough about my trivia question last time because I was sort of talking about like which character had been in a relationship with Black Widow the longest in terms of like, their relationship was long lasting comic book wise in terms of like them being published, I suppose. Matt Murdock and Black Widow were in a relationship for 7 years in the comics. They were together. She co-featured in his book, and then they were on a team together. So that was the answer I was looking for. But if you're talking about like who had a relationship with her like the longest in her fictional life, it has been retconned recently that her and Bucky had a relationship back in when he was the Winter Soldier for Russia. So I suppose I'll take either answer. Um, but yeah, I was looking for Daredevil as the answer there.
Well, my question from last time, of course, Dan. We've decided now what we're doing because Dan messed this up, and then we liked what he did when he messed it up. So Dan picks a comic question, and I pick a question that's actually from the episode. So my question was from the second episode from last time, and it was, "What does Shield call the classified location where they destroy technology too dangerous to let anyone control?" And of course, that was the slingshot, and that was mentioned by lots of people in the comments. Several people caught that, and we heard it mentioned again here. So I guess that's going to be a thing. I like by the seventh or eighth episode, we will probably have heard the word slingshot so many times that that won't even feel like a trivia question because everyone will know it if they've watched the show. Dan, what is your trivia question for today?
My trivia question is, which agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. was a circus strongman before he met Nick Fury?
Ooh, good one.
Thank you.
Well done. Yeah. When are you going to run out of Shield questions, Dan?
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how long it takes.
Eventually, you might get stuck with just having to do like straight Marvel things.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe I'll do a graviton question or something at some point.
Yeah, maybe the show will fuel you with enough characters that you'll be able to go to things. Yeah,
Yeah, that would be awesome.
it's cool. You didn't have to fall back on him for this one, and he was in this episode.
Yeah,
My question is, in what state are we told Ward grew up in?
that's an awesome question.
In what state did Ward grow up in? We're told in that he says it to Sky in this episode. Well, anyway, folks, that's it for us today on Shield discussions, and we'll be with you again next week to discuss episode 4. Dan, thanks a lot, man. That was great. That was fun.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me as always. I had a great time. I can't wait to see the next episode. It's gonna be awesome.
We'll see you next week. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.